Hello, and welcome to the Speaker Series presented by the Entrepreneurs Forum, which is a weekly event featuring industry leaders held every Thursday on Zoom. It's designed for learning and networking. We're open to guests, speakers, and applications are welcome post-episode. Make sure to join us the second Thursday of each month for Radiant Resilience with Jessica Carwatt, discussing how to boost your business by prioritizing your health. The third Thursday of each month for Tech Horizons with Cassie Millhouse. Stay ahead of the latest technology trends. The fourth Thursday of each month is with Marketing Maverick with Fritz Collinet, where you'll learn from the best in advertising and marketing. In today's episode, The Financial Canvas with Boris Blum, we are joined by a special guest, Alex Snider. And now I turn it over to you, Boris.
Well, thank you, Erica. And Alex, I am super excited for us to have our chat today. I appreciate you being a guest, and you've got such an interesting background. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your background, how you went from athlete to marketing to strategy and all of that? So.
Thank you so much for having me, Boris and Erica. I'm super excited to be here. I love talking about entrepreneurship. I love talking about strategy. I love talking about people doing what they want to do. So I'm very excited. I don't know. I think I have a bit of a winding, unique background, but then so often when I meet other people, they also have a winding background. I think we all kind of have unique paths. I think what's most interesting about mine is hindsight is 2020. So when you look back, suddenly it all makes sense. So I started my life out as an athlete. That was my aspiration. I wanted to get onto the junior Canadian team. I had, looking back, a lot of entrepreneurial traits, resourcefulness, tenacity, not really willing to take no for an answer. And so I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to train at a very high level, to compete at a very high level, to train with some of the Olympic team members in Canada. Really a lot of opportunities that frankly weren't financially available to my family, but I found a way. And looking back, in addition to sort of the makings of that entrepreneurial spirit, was also strategic thinking, analytical thinking, learning how to execute on the plan. And really looking back, I see that learning to look at a course, walk it, make decisions about angles and strategy, and then watch other people and potentially change your approach, or with the time that you were, executing, depending on what happened, having to change, in a moment and pivot. That really became just a very normal way of thinking for me at a very, very young age. For better or for worse, I'm always analyzing a scenario. And in addition, I was also really big in team sports, rugby, which similar, lots of strategic, lots of understanding the competition in yourself, lots of seeing opportunities and then putting, someone into that space, but also the style of leadership. So I was very quiet, very shy, but I was regularly put into leadership roles. And I realized now that that was because I understood what it was like to, feel excluded and things like that. So I was very big on making sure everyone was included. I knew how important it was that everyone understood what was going on and their role. And so I look back and I see I was always a quiet leader. I wasn't the loudest person, but I was the person making sure that everyone was plugged in, that everyone knew what they needed, and that my role and my success was ultimately their success, was, this, what I would now say is servant leadership and really empowering others. I think that's the leader's role. And I think that is what I learned very early on. So as for how I went from that to everything else, like most things in life, we don't always get to fulfill the full realm of our dreams and plans. And, there were some changes in my life. So I worked a lot of different jobs from a very young age. I got a lot of great experience. But quite early on, after my undergrad, I found myself working for a team of surgeons. They had some needs around succession planning and business growth and formalizing the way in which they grew their business and marketed. And I ended up taking night courses and finding it fascinating, still not really knowing what I wanted to do after kind of my big plans from my first 20 years of my life. It's changing. And through that, I found out about this neat thing called consulting and business. And I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. You know, I really like numbers. I'm a real numbers person. At the time, I didn't think I was really a people person, but I knew I was really interested in how people thought and operated. And I eventually went and did an MBA in strategy and finance. And while people ask me all the time about MBAs, and I think similar to what we might talk about today around entrepreneurship, I actually don't think they're the best thing for everyone. But for me, it was one of the best things I've ever done for myself, in terms of helping me tie together the experiences I already had with some structure, with an incredible community, with a lot of applied learning throughout the program as well. And I came out during the housing crisis, which is a terrible time to be looking for a job, but I managed to get a job in strategy consulting. I was very fortunate. I went into strategy consulting. I went into a boutique firm, French firm, and that focused a lot on natural resources, which I was really interested in. And I spent the next decade doing strategy, operational improvement, and mergers and acquisitions in that space around the world, having, you know, experience on steroids in terms of, you know, the learnings. And then I made a bit of an unusual decision to just step away from it all. I knew I wanted to do something a little bit different. I was being given some amazing opportunities, but I knew that that next step was going to be really hard to walk away from. And so I sold everything. I was living in London at the time. I left without having another job lined up, and I gave myself some objectives around, you know, feeling healthy, feeling inspired, and feeling really connected, and giving myself a bit of space to figure out what I wanted to do next. I knew I wanted a bit more purpose, a bit more building rather than fixing businesses, finding a way to help people who were really, really driven and wanted to be there. And I ended up partnering into a startup that I was on the board of, and also co-founding and working on some other startups. The next few years are kind of wild. I think we would be here all day, but the short version is grew, matured, fundraised, did all kinds of things, realized how I could apply all my learnings from the corporate space into startups, into right sizing it, learned a lot about myself. COVID happened. That was wild. We thought we might be out of business, but we ended up pivoting, 3xing the company after a deal fell through because we thought we were about to sell before COVID. And a year later, successful exit, we sold the company. And I had had the feeling for a long time that I loved doing that, but I thought that I could do more good, have a bigger impact by helping other founders and other entrepreneurs and other leaders. So that is how I eventually founded my own advisory business. And that's what I do now is I work with leaders and entrepreneurs on the strategic planning, the operational and team components, and really making sure that they are growing alongside their business, because otherwise you can grow a business, you can work in it, but if you don't work on your leadership and if you don't learn to work on the business will outgrow you. And it's a very uncomfortable place, and typically the success and growth won't be sustained.
Yeah. Well, I know that you have a very unique perspective on entrepreneurship. You've worked with lots of what we'll call startup type CEOs of companies, and you've worked on exit planning with different individuals. And so those perspectives, I'd love to hear more about how they have framed sort of your way of approaching leadership and your way of approaching strategy, and how those two things tie together.
Yeah, I think when I started what I do now, when I started Snider Advisory, I led with the tangible. And look, I've, you know, come from very finance, consulting, energy and natural resources, even medicine, quite male dominated, tangible, practical industries. And you know, I came in and I was like, I will do strategic planning workshops, and I will, you know, we'll work on the projects. my clients came in and, you know, they knew me, so they were on board. And we did the things, right? We 3x the business, we doubled the team, we hit the goals, we restructured the organization, we changed the partnership, we set up performance, we set up, you know, employee, you know, share programs, we implemented all kinds of things. But when I started getting feedback from my clients, and maybe relevant, maybe not, but I actually worked exclusively with male clients at the beginning, not by choice, just that's where I came from. That's who I knew. That's what I was really comfortable with. The feedback from them was, yeah, great. We checked the boxes and super grateful. Definitely got there faster. Working with you, appreciate it. But the personal development, the leadership development that they underwent changed their experience. And for them, that was so much of the value was in that component. They were like, I am a more confident leader. You know, I understand my company better. I understand myself and how I show up and how that impacts people and my team, the way my team reacts to me and the way that I have changed the impact on them and how they show up. That is as or more important than the actual projects and strategies and tactics we implemented, because now I have the ability to continue that and to understand it and to be more confident. And I also have a better home life and boundaries. And, you know, it took me a bit of time to kind of put together, but I think what I came to understand from that is that the intersection of the tangible and the intangible is where you get that multiplier effect, right? It's where if you have one without the other, it can improve, but it won't get you kind of where you're going. And I think leadership, I think entrepreneurship is the personal development course none of us ever asked for. And, you know, but it really brings up, it will bring up all your shit, excuse my French, but you know, the myriad of stressors that come with running a business and growing a business, whether it's your first time or your fifth time. We'd all like to think that we're these emotionally regulated adults who can just handle everything and be our best self all the time. And the reality is like most of us are not, unless we are putting in work. And that's really the same thing in business. I think business is just that, but on steroids. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that is why I spend so much time talking about leadership now, even though I would say my passion and my expertise is still very firm in strategy. And, you know, I absolutely understand all the components of operational improvement and like, we're going to get that done. And I spend a lot of time on that with my clients, but I think that having the awareness and understanding that that is a huge part of the work is so important. And I think it needs to be talked about in leadership in general, but particularly in entrepreneurship. It is sold as this glamorous, sexy thing, and it is so much less sexy in reality and often very, very lonely.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was hoping to hear more from you about, because I think that a lot of people go through this entrepreneurial journey in their mind, but until they actually get involved and get committed to a project, and then you know, it's very hard to back out once you've started down your entrepreneurial journey, right? So tell me what your thoughts are about, is entrepreneurship really right for everybody? And what are the things that people should think about before they go down that road?
It's a hard question because, you know, the reality is anyone can do it, right? And one of the things that I have had the fortune of experiencing living in so many different countries and cultures and economies is that entrepreneurship means a lot of different things in a lot of different places. And for many people, entrepreneurship is not a choice, it's a necessity, right? I call Mexico home right now. I've also called other places like Indonesia. It is quite a different reality than other countries like Canada or England, you know, and, you know, I have met people who are lawyers and went through multiple degrees and had a job that wasn't going to give them the stable life to support their family. And so they became entrepreneurs at a young age. That's something that, you know, in other countries, you would think that's crazy. Why would you not pursue your law degree, right? But so I want to caveat what I'm saying with the fact that I think entrepreneurship has a different flavor depending on kind of where you're coming from, the economy you're living in. And also, I think anyone can do it because, you know, necessity is the mother of innovation, invention. And, you know, when people need to, they figure it out. But in terms of entrepreneurship as a choice and as, you know, a decision of the lifestyle that you want to lead, I don't think it's the best choice for everyone. I think there are a lot of considerations that are not evident if you haven't maybe grown up with people in your family who are entrepreneurs, or if you don't have people in your close circle who are A, entrepreneurs, and B, like openly sharing what their reality is. Because that's the other thing is, you know, not everyone talks about everything, which is why we often see people and think that they're an overnight success when really they're on their fourth business. It's been 10 years, you know. I think that there's a lot of considerations. Also, people, like, when you're in a difficult circumstance, anything seems better. But I think that entrepreneurship is not like a panacea, right? If you hate your job, whatever thing you are doing is likely something you're going to have to do in entrepreneurship, right? Whatever it is that you don't like about what you're doing, if you don't figure that out and then design an entrepreneurial path that has a significantly different context to it, you're probably going to come up against the same thing. And I think that's where, like, the very beginning of personal development, I talk about self-awareness as one of the first steps of entrepreneurial growth and success. You know, you have to know yourself enough and face reality in order to be a great leader, in order to have hard conversations, in order to know how you react and show up, but also in order to know what you're great at and what you're not great at, so that you can proactively, as soon as possible, get help on the areas that you're not so great at. I kind of jokingly say, you know, you leave your day job, the one job, to then have all the jobs, right? When you become an entrepreneur, unless you already have, you know, another business or a large amount of capital and a team, you are doing everything. And, you know, I talk to my clients and I talk to my own podcast guests about this, and they're like, yeah, the things I hated in corporate, I still hate them, even though they're for me now. I still don't want to do them. And the only difference is it is much clearer what the, you know, impact of not doing them is. And if I put them off, now I have a crisis and no one to help me with that crisis. And I think that that is a great example, you know, and these are successful people who were, you know, high-level executives before they became entrepreneurs, that are, you know, sharing that. And that transition for them is like, yeah, I used to have a whole team that did this and I didn't like this small part, and now I don't have a team and I'm doing everything and I still hate it. So it's not a one-way ticket out of whatever ails you, whatever is bothering you.
Yeah, I think, you know, the statistics certainly bear out what you're saying. If you look at, you know, I think the most recent statistics I've seen is well over 90, but 95% or so of all businesses fail within their first 5 years. So going down the entrepreneurial route is not statistically a good pursuit of your time and efforts. But when you layer on top of the fact that most people have a lack of financial resources to go down that journey, they underestimate not only their capabilities, but what it's all going to entail. And, you know, if you think about a 9 to 5 job, you walk out of that place at 5 o'clock, you can leave the job behind and you can focus on whatever it is that you want to do. But as an entrepreneur, that luxury just doesn't exist. You're 24/7 an entrepreneur. So I think a lot of people just underestimate all that comes with that journey. But I think the underlying message, if I got you correctly, is that, you know, people are making this conscious decision because they're trying to flee away from something. There's something that is so bothersome to them in their career that they want to get away from it. And I think that, at least my sense is, since COVID has come around, this this feeling of unease in their career has become much more forthright. It's front and center for everybody. It seems like almost everybody I talk to is going through some kind of a transition in their life that's causing them to revisit their career path. And I think the alternative for most of them in their mind is, well, okay, if I'm not going to go down this career path I'm on, I'm just going to go into some kind of entrepreneurial venture doing something similar where my skill sets fit. Um, and I think that's the wrong reason, right? I'd like for you to talk more about the why, because I think without a solid why, going down that path of entrepreneurship is just a nightmare for most people. It doesn't turn out well.
Yeah, and just before I answer that, I want to go back to what you just said about the 24/7, right? Like I sort of said, you leave one job to have all the jobs. And I was talking to my partner last night about what we're going to talk about, and the PDF I was preparing, and I said, he is a lifelong entrepreneur. He's one of the people I'm talking about who had the career opportunity, but it didn't make sense. And he said, oh my gosh, people think that, right? I mean, he's been 23, 4, 5 years as an entrepreneur and been in almost every industry you could imagine. And he was like, no, it's 24/7. And your clients are way worse than having a boss. You need to answer to them all the time, and they want a million things, and everyone is different. And he was he was going on, it was like really fired him up, because as someone who has lived this his whole life and has chosen this and appreciates it, but he also thought, like, was kind of flabbergasted that people could be so naive. And I think it's naivety. I think it's a lot of things. I think social media is kind of a help and a hindrance. But I think that no matter how good the boundaries that you develop are, which I think is important, it's your business. You will think about it. It is tied to you in many ways. And so, especially in the early years, it's more painful and less sturdy. And there is a reason that, co-founded companies are 30% more likely to get funding, because one person trying to figure it all out is not a recipe for success. Most founders are, 45 when they're successful. They're often on their nth venture. So, to your point about data, it's all there. I think to your question around why. So I work with my clients on that when we first start, and I say, I need you to show up and be honest with yourself and be honest with me, because if you don't know what you're building and why you're doing it, then we can't build something that works in a way to fulfill that. And I think that that's really important. And it kind of comes back to the self-awareness, partly that if you're running away from something, you're often kind of running blind. You're just like, I'll figure it out. And I want to mention, I guess, a distinction. I think that entrepreneurship is a very, very big blanket term. You can go be a freelance something. You can use your expertise, and depending what that is, there will be varying degrees of how easy or hard it is to find people to pay you to do something where you're not an employee, but it's a very like time for money, skill for money, which is different than coming up with an idea for a business that will be scalable and grow and require kind of people and teams to operate. And I think there are a lot of similarities between them, but I just want to mention that I think a lot of people are going more the freelance route because they want certain things, and that's great, but there is a limit to that, right? You have a bandwidth cap. And if you want to go beyond that, then you have to kind of go the other way and build a business and bring other people in to help deliver whatever it is that you do, typically a service. So when I talk about the why, I think if, like I said, if you're trying to run away from your day job, you don't really know why you're doing it, other than I don't want to do that anymore, which means there are 99 other things you could be doing. And if you don't make a choice, good luck to you. You will likely find yourself feeling a very similar way, or not making progress because you don't have a clear North Star that you're aiming for, right? It's kind of like getting up in the morning and getting in your car and driving without putting a destination in your GPS and you're not driving to your favorite coffee shop, just kind of heading to another state, let's say. Well, you can go 360 degrees. You're going to have to make a choice, but you probably aren't going to end up somewhere super exciting if you just say, I'm going to get up and I'm going to drive and I'm going to take, 3 rights and a left, and I'm going to drive for 2.5 hours, and wherever I end up, that's not really how you want to run your life and how you want to run your career. And it's probably not going to make you very happy, probably not going to get what you want. So when I talk about your why, I think the other thing I tend to come across is should. People are operating under terms of success that others dictate and feeling that they need to achieve those. So people may think, I need to earn a certain amount of money, or I need to be building a business because I want to change the world and make it a better place, which is great if you do. Lots of people do, but that's not what you actually want. Then again, you are going to build something that will ultimately not satisfy you. And you will put just as much time and energy into it to not feel good at the end than if you had gotten clear on what you actually wanted and built something that aligned to that. So the honesty of what you want. And the reality is there is no wrong answer, right? Unless you are a supervillain planning to take over the world, like there's no wrong answer. There's nothing bad. If you want to earn a certain amount of money and take care of your family, great. If you want to earn a certain amount of money, retire early, great. If you want to earn a certain amount of money and start a charity, great. If you want to just earn a certain amount of money and buy a yacht, fine. Like that is fine, but just get clear on it. So why are you doing this? What are your values? This will also be really important when you start to bring other people in to make sure that their values align with the business, that it's a place everyone feels good showing up and is unified. And then in addition, what do you actually want the business to achieve? What do you want your life and your role to look like? Do you want to have a business that's in 8 markets and runs 24 hours a day and have huge teams? And do you want to be a central part of that? Or do you want a business that is, this big and has a team of no more than 10 people, and you work this much by year 10, and you have time to be with your family, or you have time to tour the world and speak, or you have time to go set up another business. So your role is really removed, and you need to make sure that you build it with a solid leadership team who can make decisions in your absence. Those are all really important. And I'm not saying you have to know all of that on day one, but you should at least have thought about it. It will change over time, right? It's like the horizon, you never get there, but you need that direction if you want to have the clarity of vision to then make a strategic choice, which is so important, to then guide the activities and energy and resources that you are putting into building that business.
Yeah, I find that a lot of times people underestimate things in life. And one of the things that they underestimate is their capabilities. They have developed certain career skill sets that in many cases are very good and valuable, but in today's environment, almost everything is commoditized. And if you're going to take your skill set, there's a market, rate, if you want to call it, for what that skill set is worth. So if you simply want to trade time for dollars, then maybe the why is not as important, right? You can literally become a freelance, fractional, whatever you want to call it, individual, and provide that skill set to the marketplace. But if you want to build a real business, in my mind, you can't really build a business unless you understand how that business is going to scale. Business is all about solving problems. You might understand that there's a problem in the marketplace that you can help solve, but is it really a problem that's big enough that can support a strong, solid business that is scalable to the level that you want to scale it? Now, some people, like I think you mentioned, are not interested in scaling anything. They want to scale it only to a certain level so that they can maintain their lifestyle, and that's fine. But that's very different than being an entrepreneur that's trying to build a big, massive vision for an organization. And I think the vision piece is so important because oftentimes success in business comes down to building a team. Generally finances and capital, you can find solutions to that. usually the problems related to operations or issues that have to do with the business itself, those things you can resolve. They're kind of linear problems. But when it comes to the vision aspect, you need to build a team of people that will help you accomplish that vision. No business has ever become successful on one person's shoulders. And how do you inspire other people? How you bring people into that vision is really, really critical. And if you don't have a very strong, scalable vision, people are just not going to be attracted to it, and you're going to have a difficult time scaling the operation. So I'm interested in hearing from you your thoughts around how people get out of this conundrum in their mind of, hey, I have a replacement for my job. I've got this new business that I'm in, but I want to now really take this to a different level. How do they evaluate their situation to see, do they really have a scalable, solid business that they can go with, or maybe they need to rethink their process?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think really to your point, you need to have that, like, again, that self-awareness. You said people underestimate the capabilities, and a lot of it is, time for money. And that's why I think two things, skill stacking is really important, right? Most successful entrepreneurs are lifelong learners. They are constantly learning new things and adding that to whatever expertise and creating a unique enough stack or a relevant enough stack that they can then merge that with other people or lead a team. So I think that's the first thing I would say is you're not likely going to build a scalable business on one skill. You're going to build it on a combination, and you're going to have to figure some things out, to your point, be real resourceful and tenacious and resilient and problem solving. But I love that you pointed out team, because being able to articulate a vision so that people can buy into it, be excited for it, feel connected to it, is a unique skill in its own right, right? And it is what we often think of when we think of entrepreneurs. We think of the visionary founder, the face of the organization, the person who sells the idea, right? And that's great. You need that person. And this is often why you need more than one person, because then behind it, you need the person who gets shit done. You need the person who turns the wild ideas into an operable plan, who, maybe isn't the one inspiring the team, but is the one structuring and enabling and empowering the team and making sure that all the right roles are there, that the processes are in place. So I think that's really important. When it comes to evaluating whether you have a scalable business, there are so many questions that need to be asked. You said somebody sees an opportunity in the market. Like, the first question, if you see a glaring opportunity in the market, the first question is, why is no one else solving it, right? I love us. We all think we're like so unique, but if you've seen it, very likely other people with more resources and more experience have seen it. So I just always want to say the first question is like, why is no one else solving it? And then make your decision based off of that. Maybe no one's solving it because of this, and you're willing to deal with that. Absolutely fine. But whether it's scalable, I think the first question is, what are you doing? So if you are doing a service where you are providing a service as an individual, to your point, that's just replacing a job. And that is absolutely, you can raise your prices to a certain amount so that you are making more and taking on less clients. And there's all kinds of things you can do to increase your revenue, but it is not truly scalable if you are the product, right? And that is often the challenge with service businesses. And it's often why a lot of really great service businesses actually started with the entrepreneur not being a service provider. They saw an opportunity, and actually what they did was bring other people together and be the kind of coalescent focal point of other people. That's immediately scalable because you are not a bottleneck in terms of the actual delivery and revenue generating capabilities. So that's one component. If you're not, and if you are the service provider, then of course there's other ways, right? Lots of people build great businesses. They're good at something, they're doing it, then they realize there's enough work to help someone else come help them. And then they start to build out, functions, departments, teams. So it's doable. I don't want to say it's not, but it is a little bit of it's something that I see a lot where people replace their job with what I would consider more freelancing, and they don't know how to kind of go beyond that. And I talk about that on my page. So there are some resources there. If you're a service business, what are your options? Just different business models. If you're doing something other, like a product, then you have to look at, product market fit. Like, how big is the actual market for whatever the product is? Is there enough people? Are there actually more people who want it? It depends how niche you are. Depends on things like, is it a physical product? How transportable is it? So how far, can you go? A lot of logistical things. Are you going to make it in one place and just send it further and further afield? Or are you going to start making it in different places to save on, shipping and have local production? If it's I always say, people believe in passive income. I'm gonna make a digital product and then I'll just set it and forget it. And it's like, no, I don't want to say passive income is a myth, because obviously there are ways, but in terms of running a business, even a digital product, which is the, in some ways the most labor light, you still have to market it. You still have to sell it. You still have to customer service. Nothing sells itself. Real estate needs management. So if you have, something around like a product or a digital product where you're not dealing with the actual physical logistics, then again, it's going to come down more to, where are the customers? How big is the demand? How relevant is it? How well do you understand the different markets? Because the way that you are going to communicate something in one market may be different for the same product. So those are big barriers to scaling. If you need a whole nother team to go sell the same thing in another market, the economies of scale that you would expect may not be there for you. And depending on, again, your expertise or who you have in your leadership team, you may or may not have the capabilities and the right stack to handle that.
Interesting. Well, I can tell you from my experience, because it's so heavily focused on the financial aspects of things, when I look at companies as an investor, oftentimes the first perspective that the investor is looking at is, what am I investing into? Who is this team? Who is going to execute on a strategy? And what's the likelihood of success here? And I think oftentimes I've met entrepreneurs that they focus on building their business around what their unique ability is. And that unique ability may not be something that they can productize, or at least they haven't found a way to productize. And that stops most investors from pursuing it forward, because obviously they don't want to invest into a person. They want to invest into a business, and the business requires that team approach. So I think a lot of the points that you're bringing up are very interesting. But I'd like to take a different spin on the conversation and get your perspective on, what about people that have thought about this entrepreneurial journey, haven't maybe pursued it, or maybe they pursued it, stubbed their toe, and it didn't work for them, and they're looking for alternatives. What are alternatives that you've seen people deploy as a way to kind of achieve financial independence, and resolve whatever that angst is that caused them to get away from the job, the 9 to 5, which they were unsatisfied with, to get into a space of, somehow building financial independence for themselves? What are some of those alternatives you've seen?
I love that question, because again, I know I am an entrepreneur, right? Like, I don't want to be down on entrepreneurship, but I do think it's oversold as this blanket answer to all of life's problems. There are so many great alternatives. So, before you leave your job, entrepreneurship, right? There is a huge need for entrepreneurial spirit inside organizations. And whether that's your current organization or finding a new job that has more opportunities for it, if you are passionate about something in your company, or you see an opportunity, an idea that's not within your like direct job description, talk to leadership, right? I mean, of course, I realize not every organization has growth-minded leaders. And so if you are a growth-minded person, you want to be doing, innovative things and growth, maybe it's not the company for you, but it doesn't mean that there isn't a great job for you with great leaders who will love for you to own a project and chase something and you know, really, really be passionate. And it can often also sometimes be how you maybe make a transition from your current role to a slightly different role and find organizations you can grow with. So I'm a big fan of intrapreneurship, and it is absolutely what I practiced before I left and joined the entrepreneurial ranks. Another one is, and this is maybe a few things that fall in this category, is there are a lot of ways to own a business without starting a business from scratch. So there are franchises. Franchises is a way, and it requires capital, but you get to start a business with a map of how to succeed that other people have used, right? You get all the instructions, you get all the brand is there, you get the business model, you get all of this support, and you get to run your own business. Now, if you're absolutely unwilling to follow anyone else's rules, maybe this is not the way for you, but it's a great way to experience business ownership in a much more supported way. You can also purchase an existing business. I think the statistic is there's over 2 million businesses for sale in the US alone. These are family businesses with no one to succeed them. These might be younger founders who are ready to move on to their next business. And these are cash positive businesses that are earning money. So if you buy that business, you are making money day one. It works. Now, there's creative ways to finance it, and you can improve it, or maybe bring in some of that skill stack you have to make it better, make it more profitable. But again, a softer landing. If you're interested in that in particular, I'm going to recommend Cody Sanchez is an amazing person to follow. This is exactly what she talks about. She's great. The other thing I would say is you can join another startup at the sort of early or mid stage. So figure out what it is that you are great at and that you really thrive on doing. So I call this your zone of genius. It's something you're good at, you enjoy, and it moves the needle on the business. And find an entrepreneur that is at a certain stage and needs what you do. And you can then have the entrepreneurial experience without starting from day zero, from nothing, lone wolfing it, which we already talked about, not great. And also know what you want, right? So if you want to go in and be a partner and a co-founder and really like have skin in the game, then be ready to negotiate on either sweat equity or some sort of buy-in, depending on how far along they are. You can join the entrepreneurial journey mid-flight, basically. I think the last thing I would say is I don't think every side project or passion project needs to become your full-time business. So if you're interested in this, or you like in general as a concept and you want to know what it's like to start a business, or you have something you really, really enjoy doing that you think you could monetize, it doesn't mean you need to quit your job today and make this a $1 million business. You can run something on the side, either because you love it and it really lights you up, or because it's a way to augment your income, or to, there's a lot more flexibility today. And I'm a big proponent of don't ask, don't get. So if you really want to do something and try it out, figure out, what it would take in terms of time, money, and skills, make a plan and make time for it. And if it gets to the point where you need more time, talk to your boss. If you don't slack on your job. If you're great at what you do, your company will often accommodate you wanting to work different hours or less hours or all kinds of things. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And I just don't think everything is black and white and has to be, I'm good at this, so I'm going to turn it into a business that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I think what you're bringing up is great, because there's lots of alternatives to what we'll call a job, right? The 9 to 5 trading time for dollars. And some of the businesses that you mentioned, or alternatives you mentioned, are easily transferable into what you'd call a job. It may be in business for yourself, but it's still going to be a 9 to 5 type of a gig. I think the more important thing for people to understand is, if you're trying to build a scalable business, you have to have that big, audacious vision, that inspiring vision. And just because you don't have one, it's not a bad thing. It just means that you haven't developed it yet. Maybe the timing is not right for you to go down that entrepreneurial path. Find somebody who has a big, inspiring, audacious vision and partner with them. I think the future is going to be very different than the past. I think prior to COVID, there was a lot of folks that just thought about trading time for dollars, a traditional career path or job path, whatever you want to call it. But I think the future looks very different. I think the future is all about collaboration. And if you can find other people that have that big, inspiring, audacious vision for their business, and they're doing great things, and you're passionate about the same things they are, then find a way to work with them. Tie your hitch to them, and I think you'll do much better than trying to build something out that you maybe don't have a very clear vision for the future and have a difficult time implementing. So
I could not agree more. And that was my path to entrepreneurship, right? I at
Mhm.
first partnered into an existing business that had grown to a certain point, kind of plateaued. It wasn't super profitable. The founder knew what he needed help with. And so I went in, but the circumstances were it wasn't a job, right? It was come in and be a partner and, take the risk with me. And there's a potential payout at the end. Now, I was financially fortunate to be able to do that after working a decade in consulting 18 hours a day with a great salary, right? I again, we co-founded other things together from the bottom up, but again, I was passionate about building good businesses, and I really saw the value in the ideas that my business partner had, and we obviously worked on some of them together, but I wasn't coming with like, oh, this is the thing that I like think about and can't, go to sleep because I'm so excited about it, right? At the time, I didn't have that. I have other things that I feel that way about, which are more to do with social impact and things like that. And so again, my entrepreneurial blueprint or archetype is that I am an operator, an enabler, somebody who, when I see someone who has an idea that I believe in, I'm the rocket fuel to get them further and faster, right? And so I think that that's such a great point, is that is a huge, huge opportunity. And that's why I'm such a big believer in collaboration. And again, depending on where you are, you can do that. Similar, I started my own company, which I do have, which ironically is about helping other people still to build theirs. I started it while I was a VP for the company that bought our company. So I was in an executive position with an executive salary, and I could afford to do things in a certain way. And, I had a bit of a team from day one, and I did it in a different way. And I was also, older. I think that there's so many different ways you can build things. And I built for almost 5 months, which is not long. I just want to put that out there. It's really not, but I built for 5 months to the point where I had to make a choice between continuing to build this or my day job. Right. And this had been my plan, and this is my exit plan. And it was really in the works for probably about 3 years ultimately. But from my first client to when I left was about 4.5, 5 months. And I, was like, okay, I can make this work. And again, I knew I had a buffer. So I think that is really important. And again, what I mentioned before, you can start a project with your day job, and then that project maybe gives you enough money to buy some real estate. And I know you love talking about this, and then now you have a real estate portfolio, a side hustle that earns money, and a day job. Then you build that up. And so maybe one day you do leave your day job, but it's not to run a business in an entrepreneur from the ground up. I'm going to develop something and it's going to take over the world. Like maybe it's a way to a really different lifestyle. And I think that's why you need to understand your why, right? What is your why? Is it that you have this burning passion for this idea that keeps you up at night and you would just go to the end of the earth to see if it could work? Or is it, I want a certain lifestyle, or I want to feel a certain way in my job, or I want to interact, right? I knew I wanted to go from working with some of the biggest companies in the world to working with smaller organizations where everyone generally wanted to be there and was vaguely aligned in terms of direction, right? And so I went and I worked in much smaller organizations and in a culture that was so different in startup world than it had been in my clients when I was in consulting, working for energy and natural resources companies. And it's not a down on them, but it was just, I knew I wanted something different. I wanted a different feel. And I went to, we couldn't pay market rates for years in our startup. People bought into the vision. They loved what we were doing. Our office was full of the high-tech toys. We had cheap but fun team building. Like we got there and we delivered on our promises. We were upfront about what we could and couldn't do. We didn't have benefits at first. We had big focus on progression and growth, but there was always, you had to give a certain part. We couldn't fully fund. Like we were not ticking a lot of the boxes that a lot of people think about, but the people who came in, they believed in it and they grew with us. And, as we figured it out and we scaled, their salaries went up and they got benefits and there were much more perks and the office got nicer and, there were more parts of the team. So it wasn't necessarily we worked less, but there was more support.
Yeah.
But you got to know what it is you want, because if you have 3 kids and a mortgage and a desire to stay fit, that's probably not the company for you right now.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that, I'd like, before we close out our session, I'd love to get your opinion on a completely different topic. And it's sort of future focused, right? Where is the world headed? I think if you look at the Western world in general, from a demographic standpoint, we are aging out, right? Most of the baby boomers are getting older, they're going into retirement, they're exiting the workforce. So the demand for human talent is getting very severe. That being said, the rest of the world is awash with physical capabilities. Like they've got younger populations, think of China, India, places like that, where they can do lots and lots of manual labor and they can scale businesses around that. The problem is the future looks quite different than the past, right? We have robotics, we have AI, we have machine learning, and all these things that are going to impact the way companies are going to develop products and services in the future. And I get a sense that having a younger population is going to be less important when you have robotics in play. And the ability to leverage what we'll call AI as a general term, but leverage even robotics in the Western world is going to be very much dependent on what people's unique skills and abilities are. And if you're used to working in an environment where you don't have, where it's more of a commoditized skill set, you're going to find yourself less and less relevant going forward. And I think that that is going to be very, very unnerving for a lot of people, very disruptive in the business world. I'd love to hear what your thoughts on that are and how people can prepare themselves maybe for a more unpredictable and chaotic world.
Oof, that is a big question. I mean, I think everything you said is absolutely on point. I think it depends a little bit on the types of businesses that we're talking about. A younger population and robotics is definitely like really relevant to physical businesses, production, manufacturing, construction, anything that, to your point, requires sort of physically fit labor. But I think those same economies have this young, hungry population, and the accessibility of information and education has grown exponentially. And so those same populations, look, I'm not going to stand here and say that a lot of the same barriers don't continue to exist and that, your financial situation doesn't dictate what you can do. Of course, that's still a hurdle for people in many parts of the world. But I do think that the accessibility of information education is changing that. So that these same populations that are younger and physically fit are also in many ways more educated, very willing to, you know, put in the grind to learn skills that are marketable, and not linked to their physical location. So, you know, wage arbitrage, offshoring are not new concepts. So I think yes, if you have a, you know, commoditizable skill, whether it be physical or intellectual or knowledge-based work, absolutely, you are at risk. And I think that what we talked about earlier about the intangibles, I think that is the differentiator, right? It's the ability to stack skills in a way that is unique. It's the ability to lead and bring together and relate to people with whatever your skill set is, that is really going to continue to make you relevant and, you know, I hate to say valuable, because obviously as people we're all valuable, but valuable in a quickly commoditizing job market, business environment, right? It's not just people, it's businesses as well. You could, as an entire business, be replaced quite quickly these days, by somebody offering the same or better for less, you know, and 24 hours a day, because of the ability to have teams all around the world. And yeah, whether that's good or bad, I think it just depends on your perspective. But I think of myself, and even at KPMG, I remember we had an offshore team in India. It was an office specifically set up for certain of our strategy groups. And it was newer back then, and it was tough, and people had a harder time figuring it out. And I guess, again, for whatever reasons, it really worked for me. I worked really well with these teams. I brought them into every project I have, and, you know, eventually got recognized for that. And I think, you know, that's going back for 10 years. Now it's almost like, if you don't have offshore people in your organization, like, what are you doing, right? And there's lots of reasons, of course, that are super valid to have that, to have a fully onshore team. But I think even with the prevalence of offshore work, as a business leader, as an entrepreneur, the ability to create connection, so, is still going to be really relevant. It's one thing to have a bunch of skills that can deliver. It's another thing to have a really well-oiled team and good culture, which is both for people to stay and for people to work most effectively and deliver. I think that those intangible skills, they're not irreplaceable. It's not that they can't be replicated to some degree. It's not that they can't be enhanced by technology, which they absolutely can be. There's great tech platforms that will help connect. But one thing I see is people saying, you know, get rid of meetings. If you have a remote organization, meetings are a pillar of the culture you are building. And if you do not connect the people in your organization, no matter where they are, what they're doing, how commoditized their work is, I think you're missing out on part of the opportunity and the value.
Yeah, I think what comes to mind for me is what I'll call R&R, and that is people need to be resilient, and people need to be, they have to learn the skill of reinvention. They have to be able to reinvent themselves because that's the world we're in. So, but this has been an absolute pleasure, Alex. I appreciate you coming on. This has been a joy. And I know you've got some free gifts for people that have helped on. And so we'll make sure that that gets out to everybody. And unless you have any parting thoughts, I really appreciate you being here. And hopefully we get a chance to do this again.
Same. Thank you both so much. It's been so much fun. And yeah, I'm, based on our conversation, put together a PDF. So I think Erica is going to make sure everyone gets that, and hopefully it's helpful. And I would love to hear from anyone on your thoughts, questions, or follow-ups.
That's awesome. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you both for being here. Thank you, Alex. If anybody has any questions, I've got a few minutes. Just kind of raise your hand up in there if you have any questions for Alex. She's still on.
It's Amy. Hi. No, just wanted to say that was a wonderful talk. I resonated with so much of it. I was just madly writing notes about that. And your particular question about entrepreneurs, like why, was really important. And it's interesting to be an entrepreneur and then looking back on this years later of how what drove my decision to leave corporate and then come and be an entrepreneur. And I think that the why actually has shifted over the years. So yeah, from something like participating in I originally wanted to do coaching, and then now we're helping people scale and grow and have an exit strategy and so forth. But then do we really want to do that? Or we're in our 50s now, and so is it lifestyle that we're seeking? What is the next phase? And being in that sandwich generation where we have elderly parents and we have kids that are growing up, we're in the middle. We're the meat. I was just telling my husband that as you were talking. So I would love to have a further conversation on this, because it's really important. As we move forward, we got to know our why, and then why we're doing anything. So thank you.
I think that's such a great reflection. Thank you, Amy. And I'm glad it resonated. I wish I had this guidance when I was making the leap. I was, preparing this kind of overview and thinking like, yeah, this would have been great to have. And the why changes 100%. I agree with you. That's why I said you need this North Star and you got to do the work, but you're never going to get there. It's directional, and it will help you make decisions, and it will shift over time. And it's kind of hard to say like, do all this work because you have to have this, but like, you're never quite going to be there. But that's the reality. And I think the important thing with what you just said is you need to re-envision it now as to what is it as a lifestyle, because then there are a lot of ways to reach that goal, right? It's not that you do that and therefore this is your option. It's do that so that you can then look at your options and your strategies and your trade-offs. There might be 5, 10, 50 ways, if it's lifestyle, right, to do what you're still doing, but with a different business model, or to leverage the benefits of that into something else. It's not necessarily starting over, right? There's a lot of transitions and a lot of things, but if you don't kind of have that direction, then you can't start working backwards from it. And I think that is also why sometimes you see people wreck and rebuild, which is fine. It's if that's what you need to do, but it's not always what you need to do. And sometimes you could lose a lot of momentum or lose out or set yourself up for a really hard road that you didn't need to by doing that. But I also want to say that why that reflecting, like, it's hard, right? It's what a lot of people call like the work. Like, you got to face some things usually. We all have like some things that maybe are uncomfortable that have been with us our whole life that we just kind of like haven't dealt with or haven't managed to unload. So yeah, if you ever do want to have a conversation about that, please feel free to reach out to me. LinkedIn's probably the easiest way.
Yes, I just connected with you. And one other thing was in the beginning when you said that you leave your job, your day job, and then all of a sudden you have all of the jobs. I so identify with that. I've been dealing with that for many years. And even with delegation, there's the whole setup of making sure that you transfer whatever skills or things that you need to another person. And that takes another thing as well. So
Entrepreneurship in the early days, I like to say, it's like being a one-man band on fire. Like, and even if you have the money to bring people in early on, the reality is there's a lot of benefits to figuring it out yourself so that you understand the business enough in order to strategically and intelligently delegate and bring people on and be able to actually know what's happening and monitor and manage progress. So, I don't think there's a easy button for entrepreneurship, even with all the resources, right? If you are figuring out something new, then you're figuring out something new. And it's everything. So kudos to you for embarking on that and figuring it out. And I think it's great that you recognize that it is an evolving path. thank you for everyone for joining. I don't take your time lightly. It's really valuable. So thank you. And, you know, if something comes to you after, then you know where to find me on LinkedIn. I always love hearing questions, ideas, experiences.
Thank you, Alex. Once again, always a pleasure.